Moment, please, Your Worship. We are live, Your Worship.
Great, Council. I'd like to call this regular council meeting of March 12th, 2024 to order with adoption of the agenda. Someone want to make that motion? Councilor Orlando, second by Councilor Lucel.
Your Worship, point of order on adoption of the agenda. I wanted to review the two items that were introduced as notices of motion. Last week, I've been talking with staff in the interim about the situation. I don't feel that those were introduced according to our policy, and I'm seeking clarity on whether they should appear as agenda items here.
Comment, Ms. Floyd.
Sure, Your Worship, to Councilor Orlando. We didn't have a policy in place up until, well, we still don't have a policy in place. So I think going forward, if council chooses to adopt the policy that's introduced at the Committee of the Whole on Thursday, then we will follow those rules. But as of right now, I think that the three that were brought forward on the 27th should continue to be addressed.
Okay. My thought is that in lieu of a policy, our current policy defers to the latest Robert's Rules of Order, and the rules specify that notices of motion need to be put on the agenda a week ahead of time, as does the proposed policy that's up for discussion at the Committee of the Whole later this week. So I'm seeking resolution options based on a point of order, which is up to the chair to rule on how we proceed with this. I did have correspondence with Mr. Parliament, and Mr. Parliament indicated that it was a late item. However, late items require unanimous vote of council for them to make it onto the agenda. So right now, I think we're in no man's land. My ultimate concern is that whatever policies come of this will be challenged or face challenge as a result. So.
Would you like to do the notice of motion response? It is items 10A and B.
Well, one's just a verbal update, so I don't have an issue with that. And the other one is going to involve another motion. And so if we put this other motion on the table, Councilor Orlando, are you telling me that that may be subject to being thrown
out? Under procedural rules, it's up to the chair to make a decision on these on an objection.
On notice of motion?
Oh, no, on an objection. Or on a point of order, I should say, not an objection, point of order.
Well, I appreciate your point of order, but I think we're going to go through with what we've got on the table now. Can you live with that?
It's up to the chair to make that decision.
Okay, so that's a decision. All right, so now I will ask for adoption of the agenda. Someone want to make that motion for me, please? Councilor Lucel, is there a second for that motion?
Sorry, Worship, can you amend the agenda to include 90.2B in the in-camera section?
Okay, I don't need to do that at the in-camera. Okay.
Well, you'll need to do it in both.
Okay, so I'd also like to amend the adoption to include 90.2B of the community charter to be added to the agenda. And that's dealing with information that's coming from the provincial government that we need to keep confidential at this point. So will you amend that? So
yeah.
Councilor Lucel will go further with that. Is there a second for the motion? Councilor Staples. All in favor?
No, that's good. That's good for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Councilor Orlando.
Your Worship, I mean, technically, is this a late item that we're amending? I'm not too sure what that one is.
Yes, it will be a late item. Councilor Orlando added on to the in-camera report.
Okay.
Verbal update only.
Yeah, all in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. Adoption in the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 27th. Someone want to make that motion for me, please? Councillor Lucio, seconded by Councillor Cherry. All in favor?
Your worship, I'd like to also raise a point of order on adoption of the minutes. These are indicated as notices of motion. However, in the wording that I saw most recently, it did not indicate who made the notice of motion. And secondly, notices of motion, as mentioned previously, require 1 week notice. If they are to be included as a late item, that would also, again, require unanimous adoption. And finally, a late item is incumbent upon the person who is moving, or with a notice of motion, it's incumbent on the person who is adding the notice of motion to then at the next meeting present the whatever is in the notice. What we have here is essentially a notice of motion that was not voted on. And then that prompted staff reporting and discussion and significant policy development at this meeting. We should actually be addressing the initial question now at this meeting. So for that reason, I'm objecting to these points, which are purely procedural. And I would also make the point that it's not that challenging to do this right. I do appreciate staff that's working to put this policy in place, to have it in place for the next meeting. But in the meantime, again, I still have the same concern, and I feel that consideration should be held to withdraw the 2 items that are under here and perhaps put them forward as a new late item and a notice of motion and have them discussed at the next meeting. I feel procedurally that would put them on firmer legal basis going forward.
Comment? Again, it's my decision.
That's correct.
So my decision is we will adopt the minutes as they are, noting that Councillor Orlando is objecting with the points that he has just mentioned. Councillor Palmer, can you give me some direction, please?
Yeah, I was just going to talk to the motion, debating whether to do it now or as it's arising. I think I'll do it now. Councillor Orlando raises a number of very valid points, and he did last meeting. And I'm stating that with someone with significant experience in corporate procedural matters. And just as I guess from my point of view is when do procedural things matter and when do they not matter? And we've had this discussion even with our CAO, who is has stated publicly that he's a get things done kind of guy, not a procedural guy. He's how do we get stuff done? And that's good. And we have a corporate officer, Cindy, who's doing, I think, Ms. Floyd, who's doing a great job as a corporate officer. And one of the flaws that happened last meeting is we didn't have the corporate officer here. And how that whole thing played out was problematic in many, many ways. And one of them is the absence of our understanding of basic meeting procedural things, all of us in the media, and how to get that on the rails in a better way. I disagree with Councillor Orlando on one point that there's an easy solution right now. If there is, I'd like to hear it, because I think it was so messy on so many levels. And then how do we record that history? And then ultimately the points that Councillor Cherry was putting on, he just was basically wanting some information on things that are relevant from the council. That's my perspective anyway.
Right.
And so these notices of motions, which are in here, even right now, they're not even notices of one's a motion. The other aren't motions. They're information items. So I think I'm looking forward to getting the policy and then how we proceed going ahead, making sure we do that. I don't see any high consequence items with this particular thing where it is right now. It's not 100%, that's for sure in my mind. But that's just some of the stuff. And really, if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. But when it does matter, it really matters. And that's what gets municipalities into legal trouble, costs us a lot of money. It ends up being a conflict between councillors. We're distracted from the business at hand. And that's why the procedure is there. And I think that's very, very valid. And I'll just leave it at that for now. But unless Councillor Orlando has a solution for the particular motion right now, which is adoption of minutes, which I was interested to see how staff was going to do those minutes to accurately reflect what happened last meeting. And for something that is procedurally broken on many, many levels.
Sure.
And I think they've done a reasonable job at that. It's not perfect because in my opinion, it can't be perfect.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Councillor Orlando, do you have feedback?
Your worship, as a suggested solution, it would be to strike 10A and 10B from the agenda and have those brought forward again. I don't know if there's much of a delay. I would say, however, that I have much more of a concern about item 10B. A notice of motion brought forth by a councillor is meant to be sort of an initiative from the councillor that is supported by the councillor, including putting the wording a week ahead of time and then discussing it to the next meeting. Procedurally, we essentially have a staff proposal in front of us, and I have concerns about it moving forward this way, especially without notation on the agenda as to who brought forth the notice of motion and who seconded the notice of motion. Those are the only two requirements.
Ms. Floyd, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Orlando, the minutes contained information that Councillor Cherry brought the notice of motions forward. You're right, in the agenda, it does not. However, the minutes are on the same agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So also 10B, the one you have concerns about, there is an option in there to refer this item to committee of the whole on Thursday where you can have a more robust conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, so bearing that in mind, I'm okay with adoption of the minutes. It does give us an option to rectify or at least have a look at this. We do have that report coming forward to look at procedure moving forward. So if the decision is up to me, I will put the motion on the table to adopt the minutes and we will move forward. Councillor Palmer, you have a comment?
Yeah, so the question is on section 10. So 10A, even though it says notice of motion, basically it's just a verbal update. I think that's pretty harmless.
Yes.
And so with 10B, I think Councillor Orlando has a relevant point on that. And I guess the question I would have is, if this was not on the motion, what's the consequence of leaving this until next meeting?
In my mind, there isn't one. There isn't one.
So right now we have a motion on the table to adopt as, this is on the agenda. Yeah, to adopt as amended with the one little procedural thing for the in-camera. I'll move to further amend to remove 10B from the agenda.
Okay. So is that, and that's seconded by Councillor Orlando? Anything further before I call the question on that? All those in favor to do
Just for clarification, is this on the minutes or is this?
we
to
haven't
amend
adopted the agenda yet, have we?
We've adopted the agenda as amended. We have not adopted the minutes.
Right.
So we're already past that. My apologies. So what we can do when we get to that is we can kick that over to committee of the whole and then bring it back to the next council meeting.
I'll have to withdraw my motion because it was based on that's where we're getting the two parts confused. So the agenda has already been adopted. And so right now there's a motion to accept the minutes as they are. I certainly, once the minutes are adopted, I don't know if there's any dialogue on the minutes themselves, but I would be prepared to put a motion on the table after this is done to remove that 10B. I think that could be done after the fact.
Or Councillor Palmer, we could remove it. The recommendation for 10B could be to push it to either committee of the whole on
could-
Thursday or the next
Could be done
council
that
meeting.
time. Yeah, either way. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
So we're on the minutes then.
we're on the minutes. All right, any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Orlando is opposed to adopting the minutes. Council is in favor. Motion is carried. Any business arising from the minutes of February 27th? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to announcements from the mayor. So I just want to take a couple moments to thank everyone involved in getting the Winter Carnival done, especially to Ellie Bruni, Spandex Collective, for all the work that she put in and for her vision, and for all those who volunteered, took time to make this come to fruition. It was a great time, and I just really appreciate how that went forward, and hoping that we can get back to making this an annual event. I want to also say that be thankful to Francesca Williams for her logos, and they've been unveiled during the Winter Carnival. That interaction and engagement is now ongoing till the end of the month. And just encourage anyone who wants to weigh in to reach out either through Talk Revelstoke or at the pop-up events that Francesca is holding. And we are now going to move on to delegations and presentations. We have Wild Site Revelstoke, Eddie Patrician and Christy Chorney here. And so folks, if you'd like to come to the podium, we will give you 10 minutes to present.
Hello, everyone.
As Eddie's setting up, hello, thank you very much, Mayor Souls and Council, for the invitation to present to you today. I follow up to our letter we submitted January 31st. We have about a 10-minute presentation, and as soon as Eddie gets, then we'll proceed.
Showing up for you guys?
It is.
Screen?
We got your screen, Eddie.
It's a small screen showing up on here. It's
I can start. So Revelstoke, as you know, is in the heart of the Northwest Inland Temperate Rainforest. And some of the most incredible and endangered forests lie just north of Revelstoke in the low elevation cedar hemlock zones on which Revelstoke Community Forest Corporation operates. These are globally significant forests. I think we tend to forget how fortunate we are to have them. In terms of carbon, they are amongst the most carbon dense temperate rainforests in the world for carbon storage.
there. Yeah. So BC's inland temperate rainforest is one of the first ecosystems to be red listed. It's a critically imperiled ecosystem, and it's an incredible place. And what does that actually mean? That means we risk losing, caribou, rare lichens that inhabit this place, and many of those really incredible forests into the future. And one of the ways we see this is with Mount Caribou, and Mount Caribou have evolved with this ecosystem, and since 2005, we've lost 7 caribou herds in the Columbia Basin. The 7th being Frisbee Boulder Quest, which is it's functionally extirpated by the province, but there's still 9 animals there. The last herd in which also overlaps the Revelstoke Community Forest tenure, it was the South Columbia herd, and there's one more herd north of Revelstoke, and it's kind of our last shot in terms of the North Columbia, and there's 209 individuals there, and only 35% of their habitat is protected right now.
Forgot to introduce you to Eddie Patrician. He's a conservation specialist with WildSite. And I'm Christy Chorney. I am on the board with WildSite Revelstoke. So this picture is of the Goldstream area, and the green polygons are the harvested forested areas to this point, and we want to focus in on the lower right red dot corner there of the Goldstream area. So the greened out areas are the old growth deferral areas. The blue sketched out area with the pen is the polygon for CT 310 block L, specifically for our discussion today.
Yeah, this is a LiDAR map of that block that Christy just mentioned, and so the bigger the darker the polygons on that, the taller or bigger the tree. And so you can see here the red polygon is that block shape, and cutting through the middle, you can see there's a patch of old and ancient forest there, and right here. Right here is a road through that deferral polygon, and right here in the blue is a skid trail through that, and essentially that would fragment that old growth deferral polygon.
So they're proposed road and skid trail. They're not there yet. So we're zooming in a little bit farther now, and this is what we're concerned about looking on the ground. This is the area that would potentially be impacted by a skid trail and the road building happening below. These are not inconsequential trees. They're of significant age and size. This red ribbon is a skid trail ribbon, potential skid trail ribbon. And what essentially we're asking for is that there's no cutting permit or road building permit that moves forward in this area until we have a field trip that is planned for the spring and summer, spring or summer this year, to actually see the area. This is another photo from the block, and as Eddie mentioned, the forest, this deferred forest, would be fragmented if the road and the skid trail were built through this area, essentially making the deferral area ineffective.
So yeah, and I think what we want to have a discussion about is kind of the larger picture here, and wanting to change how we look at and manage the tree farm license. And this is a block up Downey Creek. This was harvested. It was off the Hemlock Road. 40 hectares of old and ancient forest. You know, this tree here it's about 2 meters in diameter, and you can see the big stacks of old and ancient trees behind that, and that's the stuff we want to avoid. And this is an aerial view of that same cut block that was harvested in 2021, and this was 40 hectares of deferral that did end up getting logged, and you can see the road cutting through those avalanche chutes.
So this picture is of the Devil's Garden Road and 26 hectares of old growth, again deferral logged in 2022. And this is core winter range for the North Columbia caribou herd. We're essentially removing habitat for a red-listed species in a red-listed ecosystem. The old paradigm of logging superseding all other values is no longer acceptable. We're beyond that. And we'd like to see council and Revelstoke City Forest Corporation start to chart a new course that's looking at a new way of proceeding with forestry practices and preserving the forests and the species that live in them.
But yeah, this is, I just wanted to briefly touch on carbon and its importance in this ecosystem because it's a carbon gold mine. You know, these inland temperate rainforest stands, they're right up there with coastal temperate rainforests and really any forested ecosystem anywhere in terms of their total forest carbon values. And once we clear cut them, they lose upwards of 70% of the carbon in that and relatively quickly. And so this is from the Robson Valley, same sort of forest. And they looked at different harvest methods. And with that clear cut, you can see the total forest carbon values decline exponentially. And, you know, this is a major issue. And I think the economics are changing as well. And this is a recent analysis that was done by the District of North Cowichan by two UBC foresters. And they looked at 4 different scenarios for they have a municipal forest reserve. And they're looking at how are we going to manage it into the future. And those 4 different scenarios are the status quo of, you know, they're industrially logging that landscape and they're generating timber revenue for sure, right? And especially in the short term, they are. There's no doubt a reduced harvest scenario where, you know, they're logging a little bit less. Third scenario is an active conservation scenario. I think it's in that gray and that orange in that other chart. And active conservation, maybe they're doing a bit of thinning of plantations and stuff like that. And then the 4th scenario is passive conservation, just letting nature do its thing. And what they found is that in the long term, they were making more money from managing for carbon than logging. And we see this with you know, more Mosaic Forest Management's recent you know, carbon program. We see it with Cheakamus Community Forest as well. That kind of is where the ball is going. And I think one thing we have to acknowledge is the forest industry is changing rapidly and dramatically, and there will be winners and losers in that, and those that adapt to a new future and a new reality, and societal expectations are changing dramatically, and what people value in our communities too. And the old paradigm of logging superseding other values is not acceptable, as Krista mentioned. And Christy, and there are those economic alternatives to protect these forests, and that's what we hope we can generate and explore.
Yeah, so to conclude and to summarize our request today, we're asking that there's no cutting permit and no road building permit moving forward in Goldstream 310 Block L before at least we have the field trip this spring or summer. And we're also asking to explore these alternative economic models and ways that we can manage with this, with the TFL 56 for the long-term benefits of this community and the ecosystem. Incredible carbon storing forests, endangered and potentially significant caribou. Some of the rarest and most endangered forests on a global scale are here, and they're at risk. At some point, we need to shift, and we hope that that's now. Thank you.
Great. Appreciate you coming forward and bringing us know I have received your letters, and that started the ball rolling to get you in to do your presentation. I've also sat down with one of your colleagues, Ann Keller, spent considerable time with her in my office discussing this. As board chair of RCFC, I do invite you both to join Ann and our professional forester and our board, as well as council, to come out to the tree farm and to let us explain to you what we're doing. I believe RCFC is ahead of the game as far as our logging practices and how we're adapting and thinning and doing different things that others aren't, and including looking at carbon sinks and those sorts of things. So I think the best way for us to carry on this conversation is actually out in the forest and be able to show you what we're doing so that you can see for yourselves. So, and then look at your concerns and our concerns as a corporation and as a community, how we move forward in sustainable way. So I really do appreciate the fact that you took the time to come here to present. So I'll ask any members of my council if they have any questions. Any questions for Eddie or Christie? Council Palmer and Council Lucio.
I'll let Councilor Lucio go first.
Council Lucio.
I just want to say thank you for coming down and presenting. Yeah, I know that this is kind of going against the norm and we kind of need that shift. Clearly change isn't easy and it will come at a cost. But I think continuing to have this conversation and just deferring the road construction until we're able to be down on the site would be a good plan moving forward.
Okay, Council Palmer.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions, if I may. First, I was a little bit surprised on the, if I'm understanding correct, did you say in 2021 there was deferral stuff that the province said this is deferral, but we cut it anyway?
Yeah, and some of those permits were approved prior to the deferral implementation date, and so some of those permits moved through. The deferrals in the region were, I think is it August 2021, if I'm when the final nation said yes to those deferrals in the Kootenay boundary, and yeah, they were harvested after that date, and some of those permits that were approved prior to that date, and they continue to be harvested.
So, and maybe Mayor Souls, maybe you know, is there deferral stuff now 2 years later, 3 years later almost, that's still being?
Well,
deferrals?
there's some stuff that, so the deferrals are just that, they're deferrals till they make a decision whether that is to stop harvest or to allow harvest. But the provincial government is still saying, listen, when we're in this area, you can still apply for your permits because that's your tree farm license, or if it's not a tree farm license, maybe it's another organization, another forest corporation that has tenure to cut or a permit to cut. Some of those things will still go forward. And so that is in conversation with those who allow permits and the forest corporation next to the work.
So yeah, and
Ms. Floyd.
Your worship, Kevin Bolifer is on the line. He would be willing to speak to this if you would like him to.
Okay, so Kevin, would you take up, would you like to speak? So Kevin Bolifer, for those of you who are in the community, is our forester and manager, Revelstoke Community Forest Corporation. Kevin, do you feel you could answer the question that Councillor Palmer had just had put forward?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. So to review, when the deferrals came out at first, that was November 2nd, 2021. 100%, every block that we had developed had some impact with the old growth tap polygons. So we had to make a decision at the time because we had no pre-warning. We hadn't seen the maps. So we were faced with a situation that we had to decide where could we harvest in order to keep our contractors going through the winter. And those were the areas that we had chosen due to location, the block in up the Devil's Garden, we found alternative location directly above the block that we had set aside, equivalent area, equivalent attributes, and it was just a decision that we had to make, that we presented to the community. We wrote letters in the paper and everything else to explain why we went that way, and it was just a really poor position that we were put into by the government when this all came out. So that we've reduced our cut from 78,000 cubic meters down to 50. That's voluntary. And so those were the things we felt we had to maintain some harvest because our contractors were relying on us to operate type of thing and to keep the corporation functioning is what kind of why we harvested those areas. Since then, we have completely stayed out of those polygons, except where we need to build a road, like this one situation. Just to clarify for everybody, it's 70 meters wide, this strip that Wild Site is talking about. So I completely agree that, I think we need to go for a field trip to go look at it. However, our one issue is, given the tap polygons and how they were introduced, the cutting permit that I'm going to be putting in includes this area, and it's our harvest volume for this summer and next winter. So besides, it's 0.07 of a hectare that we will be harvesting in order to get that road through, and we're going to deactivate and recontour the slope and replant it. I suspect we'll have to remove 4 trees to get that road through. And I've looked at it multiple times, and I feel that's the least impact we can have. We were severely restricted with the areas we could harvest, and so we've got to pick an area to go into. This is all second growth wood that's outside of that Ogden polygon, and so that's why we're going in this direction. And I need to get that permit in as soon as possible, so that we have harvest standing, so we have a place to harvest in the spring here.
Right. Thanks, Kevin. Does that answer your question, Councilor Plummer?
It's interesting, both with the presentation, Wild Site presentation, this, I think it's way too much for the average person, at least for me to absorb. And I certainly appreciate the presentation and the challenge that you have, the big picture, and then this is going down to a very, very tiny little ask, a very, very, very tiny little ask. And if I'm reading it with implications, that's being cumulative over time, and certainly over my lifetime, I've seen it, back in the 1970s, the focus was on the Amazon, which has been destroyed since then, but on how we harvest and what we were saying in Canada back in the 1970s about how appalling it was in Brazil, but then we're doing the exact same thing, and there's not very much left now after the years. And so in the big picture thing as well, just sort of a perspective on the caribou. Caribou's just, when I say just, it's not just, but it's the poster child of the implications. But really, the caribou is what's protecting these ancient forests, and it's more than just lichen. It's much bigger than that. And right now, the ancient forest is super dependent on the caribou, because once the caribou is gone, then there's a justification. Okay, we don't have to worry about them anymore. Let's back away. So that big picture, I appreciate that. And then sort of this, when we use the deferral, I certainly noticed that word right away, saying, okay, well, what does that, what does deferral mean? And I think most people think it's at least a deferral, but now with the narrative and kind of Orwellian double speak, it's not even really a deferral. We're redefining what deferral means. That aside, when we get down to this this one little tiny ask. I think I'm hearing from you, Mayor Souls, and from Wild Sight, and that it is reasonable and prudent for this really small ask is let's go do a field trip. And I would love to be involved with that field trip. I think there's much more with the forestry, and love to sort of dive deeper, but it's so complex and so many issues. But this is one tiny little ask, and then the question I have, because it wasn't really clear. So basically, there's deferral on either side. There's an ecosystem. Am I understanding correctly? Because I just need this super simple in my mind to understand that there's this little network between this, and they need to cut through there to get some trees for market. And so that's the challenge for them is, we just need to cut a few trees.
Yeah.
So from the community forest perspective, from an ecosystem perspective, this is the continuity that we're losing. And this is that little, and if I was to use an illustration, the TransCanada used to cut across and it would alienate wildlife. So the bears and the deer and the moose went across the highway, and then we were killing people because they were smashing into them. And now we have these beautiful little connections that we've put back in place. So this is one that's still there. And the concern that you have, aside from, if I'm hearing right, the 4 trees, it's the connectivity. And so I guess one of the questions I have, and maybe this is in the field trip, is there another option for the community forest on this little tiny piece? Is there another reasonable option? And that whole reasonable thing is, of course, is a whole other question, because I think future historians will be very critical of our forestry practices, not only from an ecological perspective, but from a societal perspective and from an economic perspective, because we're destroying something that's very precious from an economic perspective. But sorry for the long worded question, but that's essentially it. And do you know, is there another option out there that will be shown to us when we go out?
And that definitely will be something that we can look at when we're out there. I think, Kevin, when we get out there, we can show the group what the proposal is and discuss it at that point, correct?
Yeah, we could do that. Like I say, though, the way the permitting process works and the amount of delay that it takes to get approvals and everything else, that will impact our harvest for the summer. And we do need to get the permit in now in order to get the process moving. We don't have to harvest it at the moment, but we have to get the permit in because it all goes together as one unit. So that would be our problem in the short term, is it needs to be approved within the next few weeks in order for us to continue our harvest plan for the summer.
That conversation, Kevin, is with the board at the board level, so they'll have that with you. So, and we've already had part of that. So any other questions from council at this point? Any other questions of Eddie and Christy? Eddie, go ahead.
Can I just quickly respond? Yeah, no, I think your question is absolutely paramount about, these puzzle pieces of old growth and of our natural ecosystems are constantly being, it's death by a million cuts, right? The forest that we have today and those old and ancient forests are 30 years ago we were blanketed with those forests, right? Or 50 years ago or 70 years ago. And so that is really a critical piece, because we are losing it. And once you get above a certain tipping point, whether it's for caribou or lichen, it's really difficult to recover an ecosystem once you've pushed it past that point.
Could give us a few thousand years to get fixed.
Just a couple
Christy,
of comments, if I could, in response as well, and it kind of builds on what you just said. But the research paper that was on one of the slides shows, when you equate it to, now we're in 2024, we have 6 or 12 years left of this type of forest. So we keep nibbling away. Those years are rolling by and, you know, invisibly it's going away on us. And we're left with nothing. When we have the opportunity now to look at the economic alternatives that we talked about today, like could we spend some time looking at that? Because those are long-term economic inputs. These are short-term cut and get it on a truck economic inputs. We want longer-term economic inputs for this community than the forest allows.
Great, appreciate that. Any other comments from council? Councilor Orlando?
Your worship, yeah, thank you for coming to make the presentation. I do appreciate it. My question is basically how do you feel on a local level that all of the local parties involved, be it Wellsite or RCFC or other stakeholders, can work towards being as effective as possible in forest policy moving forward? And the caveat is that we don't hold a lot of the cards here. A lot of, everybody's operating under constraints, including our CFC, ourselves. We have limited ability. We don't set provincial policy. We don't, really manage outside of the borders. As an observation, for myself, it's challenging to get into real nitty-gritty specifics of something because you're like, okay, what's going on here? And then it's a whole bunch of work to find something, and then you get mixed, feelings. And I feel that moving forward, always with a positive vision towards where we're going in the future, and having people together to have as much impact locally, including, considering all of the values that are inherent locally. So, and last comment is that I'm aware that, for over the years, you've often met with our CFC representatives. I'm not a board member now, I was in the past. And everybody, lots of people, whether it's government or industry stakeholders or whatnot, to work forward. So my question is, in terms of, looking at future management and future policies, what do we, everybody collectively, including at this council table, need to do to be as effective as possible in trying to drive the best outcomes given the situation?
If I could just jump in and say, collaboration would be hugely valuable from the perspective where I'm coming from. It's Revelstoke Community Forest, but I don't think it operates under the same mandate as other municipal community forests do. They were a community forest before that. Community forest, truly involving community came into play. Not to say that board members are not community members, but it doesn't seem to have, at least from the outside, a more fulsome input from other parties that have a stake in the area. So if we're here to collaborate, we're not here to be adversarial. We want to make a difference. We realize that there's economic impacts that are of critical importance to the city. We think there's alternatives to the past practice that has been done to bring those economies into play. And we would like to be part of the solution to keep the economy robust, at the same time while keeping our ecosystems and community involved.
All right, any other questions, Council Palmer? One more.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Mayor Souls. So when could this field trip happen? Like, what would be the earliest date? I'm assuming there's tons of snow stuff there right now.
Kevin, do we have any idea about timing on field trip, bearing in mind snow load?
Yeah, given snow conditions, I would think we'd be lucky to get in there in June type of thing, because the road's not plowed or anything else. So it's going to be a little while. It depends on how our spring is and how long the snow sticks around.
Okay.
Probably early June will be it.
So once we get closer, the board can reach out to Wellsite and council, and we can pick a date that's going to work for everybody. All right. Thank you all. Thank you for coming, doing your presentation. Kevin, thank you for joining us online. And for those in the gallery with interest in old growth, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on, council, to recommendations from Committee of the Whole. Wastewater treatment plant update. There is a motion here on the table. Mr. Black, do you want to make any comments prior to us going forward with this?
I do not, Your Worship.
Okay. Somebody want to put this motion on the table for me, please? Councilor Rousseau.
Move that support be provided for Mayor Souls, Director Black, and up to 2 council members to lobby the province in person to seek additional funding for the wastewater treatment plant.
Second for the motion, please. Councilor Orlando. Further discussion on that. CAO Parliament has had staff reach out, and we have sent out some emails to our provincial counterparts to see if we can set up a meeting. You want to weigh in at all?
Sure, just quickly, we are awaiting a date. I know that Janet Del Sal has been emailing the province to set a date mid-April, 3rd week April. And we've also asked the ADM, Tara Fagnello, to advance our request to meet with both Minister Kang and Minister Papa.
Appreciate that, Councilor Fong.
I wasn't here for the committee of whole meeting, so I know that it was probably a pretty robust discussion. Could we, just for the benefit of this meeting, get a very succinct Coles notes where we were with the liquid waste management plan, what was approved, what were the conditions on that approval, and why, what the problem is?
Sure. Mr. Black, could you just bring us up to speed on that regarding the partnership and everything that we already had in place, and then now we are looking for options?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to speak very generally, and please don't hold me to dates, names, any details. Generally speaking, we completed a liquid waste management plan 2 years ago, adopted by council. That plan had a phased approach to achieve municipal wastewater discharge requirements into the Illicillewaet River. We subsequently applied for an infrastructure grant to achieve that phase 1 goal in the amount of $15 million. 10 of that was a grant. The other 5 was affirmed by community vote. Once we got into the design component of the program, the province was no longer interested in allowing us to do a phased approach to the solution, and was requesting that we immediately comply with the MWR requirements. That cost estimate to achieve that goal moved from roughly 14 million to almost $35 million. Hence, we are in a situation where we cannot afford to move forward with this project until we either have the ability to go with our approved liquid waste management plan, which was a phased approach, or we move into a full compliance with MWR and assume that we can find some additional funds to achieve that goal.
Okay, follow-up, Councilor.
Yeah, so I guess the question, so I was on the liquid waste management plan process as a council representative. And it was a good process. It was good. Steve led that with a team of engineers. There was public consultation. There was goodwill with the province. And I can't go to the actual line, but it seems like there was a change after basically an understanding that this is what we're going to need. And so getting to the point of the resolution that's on the table right now is to lobby for more money.
Correct.
I guess the question that I have is, what if we went back to what was understood through the liquid waste management plan? Would we need that money if we could just do the phased approach?
And so that's the discussion that we want to have with the ministers, to say that, yes, indeed, we had an agreement to do the phased approach. It was this X number of dollars. It's your ministry who had a change in staff, and the new staff came along and said, from here on in, you will do this. And that boosted the price, going from a phased approach to a whole-in approach on getting things done. If they could back to that phased-in approach, we would be able to do that for roughly the amount of money that we have or that we've agreed to. It'll be some increase in cost, of course, because things are going up. But that will be the conversation that we have with the ministers, and say we have 2 options here. our only two options that we see is go back to what we had all agreed on and put this forward, or we need more money to be able to do what you're doing. How do you want us to approach this?
So, thanks, Mayor Souls. I guess the question is whether, it's a bit nitpicky, but whether this is specific, this motion is specifically asking for more funding. And I'm just wondering if it would be better, and or amended to say and or respect the original intent of the liquid waste management plan, whether that would allow that other converse. Obviously, you have that latitude to do that right now, but right now it feels very weighted to this very expensive thing. And my understanding from a technical, environmental, economic perspective, the phased approach was a prudent, the most prudent approach, and with very minimal, if any, really environmental impacts. And so that I'm wondering if this is like a whole foolish approach that's being pushed down on it. So anyway, I could put that slight amendment, or if you're willing to do that, if you thought.
I have no problem with you making that amendment if you want to do that, because that would be the conversation. But Mr. Parliament, before we go further, what do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, thank you. Mayor Sol, so to Councillor Palmer's question, I would encourage amendment because if we secure a date, we will provide briefing notes to the two ministers, and in the briefing notes will be that other option. That we will clearly seek a solution. We're not just going to Victoria, hat in hand, demanding more money, or else that we will go with two options. One you talked about, the original plan, and also a potential opportunity to secure funds in other departments, which is why we're inviting Minister Popham and tourism. But the briefing notes will include both options. So I would encourage an amendment. Thank you.
So that amendment of and or respect the original understanding of the liquid waste management plan. It could either be a friendly amendment from the mover and seconder, or else I'd be prepared to put it as a formal.
You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that amendment.
You okay with that amendment?
Yeah. I'm definitely willing to hear it.
Okay. So basically, we're going to amend that to read that we're going to lobby the province in person to seek additional funding for the wastewater treatment plant, or go back to the understanding, the agreement that we had in place of the phased approach, which was agreed upon by all parties. Is that comfortable for you, Mr. Black?
Yes.
As well? Comfortable for you?
Yeah, so the original intent, because I just to keep that sort of more vague as to specific, because they might point to some clause or something.
Okay. Ms. Floyd, are you okay with that?
I am, worship.
Okay, so Mr. LaSalle will iron out the final wording here. Ms. Floyd's making notes as we speak for that. I'm going to ask if there's any other comment on the amendment to the motion. Councilor Orlando.
Your worship, just that I would prefer that the wording is a bit more general. It allows them some leeway. So I don't know what is coming up, but because I can't think on my feet as to what the provincial government's position be, what constraints they're dealing with on the situation.
Yeah, so specifically, it's adding to the motion, and I'm suggesting and or, it leaves a latitude discussion, and or respecting the original intent of the liquid waste management plan adopted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good,
And then
that gives
yeah.
ample latitude.
And
to go
then
either
the
way.
discussion will go wherever it needs to.
Good. You comfortable with that? And the mover and seconder?
Yep.
All right. Any other discussion on that amended motion? So we're going to vote on the amended motion, and that's it.
That's correct.
Okay. All those in favor? Motion is approved as amended unanimously. All right, we're going to move on to item number 8B. Call for resolutions. Someone want to put this motion on the table, Councillor Cherry?
I move that staff work with councilors Lucio and Cherry to prepare resolutions to submit to SILGA for consideration in the 2024 conference regarding food accessibility, affordability, municipal and regional district tax restrictions, resort municipality initiative funding to support local food banks and short-term rental tax classes.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Lucero. Any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Orland.
Just your worship, to check, once these are ready, they will be back for council. So. Rules in her?
Yes, no.
No, not directly. Councillor Orlando, through your worship, we sent out, these have already been formalized and copies have been sent to council. They've been submitted to SILGA already. This is more a housekeeping item because it was not included on the February 27th council agenda. So all of council has received the final submissions by email.
Having said that, they're your resolutions, council. You gotta make sure you know what you're taking to SILGA, so just to cover.
Councillor Orlando.
Yeah, just my comment, moving forward, I would like to have a bit more formality in the process, including, you know, I think there is some incumbency on, I know councilors put these forward, but it's incumbent on us to do, I think, a bit more research as we put these forward, because it becomes a muddy thing. Is it staff asking for this, or is this, you know, council asking for this? Who really worded these? And if this is retroactively sort of approving something that's put forward, it might be a moot point at this point, but I feel we also face the same situation where these were just distributed ahead of the meeting, and then we're meant to think on our feet about it, and it would be nice to have a week to look at them and have some suggestions, have friendly amendments, because that makes a little bit less pressure on everyone to be doing it in the public table, to be able to email someone and say, hey, I was thinking of this, why don't you tweet this? I think that's going to be more effective, so that's my feedback.
Councillor
Yeah, I'll support the motion. Just a couple comments. On these resolutions, I'm not sure if we've had any discussions with SILGA or UBCM, because there's been similar resolutions, not specifically, I don't believe, on their resort municipal initiative. But there may be some comments, usually is some comments if we work with them. So I think that's the role of staff, is really seeing what's already out there and already gone through. The concern I would have is with our other partners in the Resort Municipal Initiative and their perspective, because if this was to go through, get through SILGA, get to UBCM, and our partners, the other partners of the resort municipalities, have a different perspective, then we're doing a lot of work that's going to just kind of collapse. So those would be just a couple of concerns, but sure, I think staff will be able to reach out appropriately.
Good. All right, any other comments before I call a question, Councillor Stapleton?
I just wanted to voice some concern about the resolution regarding the short-term rental tax classes. It's my understanding, and I think it was the understanding of the community as a whole, when we had the presentation from city staff at the community center not too long ago in regards to short-term rentals, that the city wasn't going to move forward on anything in regards to short-term rentals until October, after we do a robust economic analysis of the impact of any kind of decision-making in the process. So I'm just a little cautious moving forward about the transparency and the openness that we're having with the general public when we say we're not going to do anything in regards to short-term rentals, and then all of a sudden here we are, making a resolution to go to SILGA. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate the comment, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, good point. So, when I read the words there was different flags and it was in my mind as to what this means. So getting back to Councillor Orlando's comments, and being reinforced with Councillor Stapenhurst, I'm tending to agree that these do need to come back to council so we know what we're suggesting goes through. So yeah, question through to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Unfortunately, the request from Silga to come to council looking for the recommendations came to a council meeting and it was pushed to the next committee of the whole meeting. There was a deadline and we were teetering on that deadline, which was why this recommendation came forward. Staff worked with Councillor Cherry, Councillor Orlando, and Allison Slater from Silga to perfect the Lucial, sorry, to perfect or to tighten up the recommendations. So I do agree with you going forward. However, we met a time constraint because the recommendation was to push these to committee of the whole.
Wait, what's the time deadline to get to Silga?
It
Already
already
passed.
happened.
It's already happened.
Yes.
Okay, so are we on their agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further comment on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note Councillor Palmer, Councillor Stapenhurst are opposed, balance of council is in favor. This motion is passed. Moving on to bylaws, 9A floodplain bylaw. Someone want to put that motion on the table? Councillor Russell,
I move that floodplain bylaw number 2369, 2024 be adopted.
second for the motion, please. Councillor Orlando, any discussion on the motion? Councillor Cherry.
Your worship, I have a few questions, your worship.
Okay.
I'm curious how properties within the floodplain have been notified about any of the changes coming to council?
Mr. Simon, comment?
Through your worship, no formal notification has occurred as we're basing the floodplain bylaw update on the previous report that council endorsed in 2022.
Follow up?
And through your worship, I would note that there's very minimal properties that are impacted. It's on the south side of the Old Silhouette for the most part, where there's been changes. So it wouldn't be too many properties that are actually impacted.
Follow up, your worship. For the properties that are coming out of the floodplain, that have restrictive covenants on title, have they been notified about the change? And can you describe the process on removing the restrictive covenants for those residents?
Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, on the Development Services webpage under application forms and guides, there's a specific application for a discharge of a notice on title. The applicant would to apply for a formal discharge, staff would review, and depending on the type of discharge, it may have to come to council for formal endorsement. So there's a process for them to go through.
That answer your question?
Yeah, it's bringing up a couple others though, your worship. If anybody else has a question, I'll give them a minute
Councillor Palmer.
to figure out my words.
Yeah, just curious, when was the previous readings done? Approximately.
I want to say the first meeting in February.
So this year.
Yes.
I guess just further to Councillor Cherry's perspective, if this was, what's the implications of delaying this? And if there's not that many impacted properties, why not communicate with them before we do the approval? It's just reading from what you're saying. So, yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that for now.
Mr. Simon, do you want to weigh in?
Through your worship, because this report is based on the findings of a qualified hydrogeologist, and you're not going to be changing the span or the scope of the floodplain, if we do that, then we're taking liability as a city. So what staff would recommend is should council adopt the floodplain bylaw, and staff can certainly reach out to the applicant. There's one applicant we were aware of, we chatted with her, who's concerned about not being notified as a part of this, because her property is now no longer in the floodplain, it was recently subdivided. As a condition of subdivision, she had a covenant on title to ensure adherence to the floodplain bylaw requirements. So now she's able to apply to discharge that. We can reach out to her directly. But I would recommend that if council is supportive of the bylaw to adopt it, so that we can inform people that they can now go through that process rather than it being delayed another 2 to 4 weeks for final adoption.
Councillor Palmer.
So through the planner, so basically she's getting more rights, not less rights.
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. The bylaw definitely makes it more clear, and there were a couple properties that previously would have been subject to floodplain requirements that are no longer subject to it.
Okay.
Just a follow up, your worship, to the chair. Since the city forced these restricted covenants on title, will it be the responsibility financially for the city to have them removed, or is this going to be on any applicant coming forward?
Through your worship, so the covenants are put on there as a condition of building permit, development permit, or subdivision. So the city's not forcing them, and the way the covenants are structured is it's more of a flag for future property owners saying, hey, this property falls within the floodplain, and in accordance with the city's floodplain bylaw provisions, or well, zoning bylaw provisions as it currently sits, you need to meet these certain specifications. So it's not adding any other restrictions than would otherwise be applicable. It's more so a flag for future property owners to say you fall within the floodplain. Here's the requirements that you need to meet should you want to develop. If they do want to have those discharged, because it was applicable at the time when they were developing the property, they would have to incur the costs associated with discharge. I believe it's a $250 application charge for a restricted covenant discharge. I can double check that, but I do believe that it's $250. It's a pretty minor fee, and most of these are delegated to staff so that we don't have to come to council for it.
Follow-up,
I guess my issue is that if we've recently forced a community member to force these restrictions on title, that it seems unfair that we'd now have them pay to have them removed when it's being removed because of changes within the city. Just want to make that note, Your Worship.
Mr. Singh.
Through your worship, because the fees and charges bylaw is a bylaw that staff don't have the ability to vary or discretion, it's council bylaw. The council, subsequently, should council adopt this bylaw, the council wanted to pass a motion arising directing that all fees be waived for individuals with floodplain covenants that then need to be discharged. That's something that council could consider. Staff wouldn't recommend it because when these covenants were put on title, they were reflective of the regulatory framework of the time. When regulatory frameworks get updated, sometimes those covenants become outdated, and then it's the onus of the property owner to apply to discharge them. So they were valid. They weren't something that was overly restrictive at the time they were applied. They were based on our existing bylaw framework. That bylaw framework has now been changed or recommended to be changed, and it is certainly more permissible for those property owners.
You okay with that answer?
I am. I appreciate the info.
Any other questions from council? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 9B, zoning amendment bylaw, please. Someone want to put that on for me? Councilor Luciano.
I move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2376 be adopted.
Seconder for the motion, Councilor Plummer. Again, this is for the floodplain update. Questions for staff? Councilor Lemon.
Just for your worship, through the chair, just for the public's benefit, since there's been a little bit of discussion of the previous bylaw, if I would like to make the request of staff to provide a real quick, under 1 minute synopsis of why some of the wording in this bylaw doesn't seem to be directly related to floods.
Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, Councilor Orlando, some of the references in there to sections that aren't applicable to floodplain regulations are just simply for cross references. So the numbering needed to be updated, and if this causes confusion, I can certainly work with the corporate officer to see if we can have a blanket amendment in future bylaws where it says renumbering and formatting as required. In this case, we just wanted to be really clear and provide, kind of the breadcrumb trail for historical review. Should there ever be a question, but it's simply just renumbering and references to the sections that get renumbered. The zoning bylaw gets complicated, a lot of cross references in there, so we want to make sure it's true.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 10A, unfinished business, BC wildfire facility update. Mr. Parliament, you have a verbal update?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think this is good news. So I'm just going to read it verbatim. This is from Candy Schroeder, who is the project management analyst for BC Wildfire Service. She responded by saying the construction tender will be posted next month. With the groundbreaking in early fall, the exact schedule will be dependent on the contractor who was awarded. It has not been postponed, delayed at all. In fact, it's the opposite. This project is a priority for the province as one, we've already started and the funding is committed, meaning other projects are on hold until this is complete. And two, the Columbia Fire Zone will be a model for other new builds going forward. So if it seems like things are taking so long, this is why we'd like to ensure that we get this model itself right. Hope this helps. Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. In addition to that, our director of operations also reached out to another gentleman from the same ministry. And they're in the process of finalizing our site development and connection to services. It should be completed by the end of April. With regards to a new building, we've reduced the footprint and are currently working on design development stage. And we're hoping a building permit by the end of the month. Completion of the building and operational date should be next year sometime, but we do not have a firm construction schedule. Haven't been that it hasn't been gone to market yet, et cetera, et cetera. So we're hoping that this facility is going to be up and running by next year, and we're going to be saw turning this fall. Thank you.
Great, appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Parliament?
I don't have a question, Your Worship. I do have a statement. I just wanted to thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the update. Myself and many others in the community have been worried with our temperate climate or lack of snowfall, what this season is going to look like in regards to fires. That's why I brought the notice of motion forward, so you get an update. As I was hearing rumors that this project was being downscaled or not going forward. So thank you for the update, and it's great to see that it's coming to fruition.
Great. All right. Moving on to 10B, density bonusing program, housing agreements, cash and lieu options. So did Councilor Palmer?
I'll just move that item 10B be referred to the next regular council meeting.
Okay. You wanted to go to committee of the whole first, just the regular?
Actually, that's a good point. I was thinking about that. So that'd be the April committee of the whole. Can't see it.
Can we put it on for 2 days from now, or? Yep.
We could within 24 hours if that's what council chooses.
Either committee of the whole Thursday or next month.
I'd be interested to hear what Councilor Orlando is.
Councilor Orlando, do you want to weigh in on this?
I don't mind either one. I'm just concerned about the procedure as it stands.
So if we go to committee of the whole, we can have that discussion and then that can be put forward to council.
Okay, so I'll put it, I'll just put a motion to refer this to a committee of the whole. I'll leave it vague as to the actual, which committee of the whole.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it if it's the next committee of the whole. With the upcoming building season, I don't want to slow down what could be a net benefit for the community.
Okay, so I'll put a motion on the table to refer 10B to the committee of the whole this week.
Thursday. Yep. Okay, second for that motion, Councilor Cherry. All right, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried, thank you. Moving on to staff reports 11A, the beer program final report, and that's not the liquid stuff. Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in front of you today, we have a staff report on it's an update and looking for direction from council on next steps forward. We do have the motion prepared as well as a couple alternative motions, and we do have Urban Systems who prepared the report for us to be able to provide a presentation if council wishes on if we were to implement or take one of the alternative presentation option, or sorry, one of the alternative motions. This would outline that program as we would see. So if council would like, we can have Urban Systems go ahead and present.
How do you guys feel? You want to see a presentation? Yep. Okay, sure.
We'll pass it over to John and Kaylee.
All right. Thank you, John and Kaylee. It's up to you.
Right on. Just start sharing my screen here. And sorry, I'll just get myself orientated here. Can you hear me and see the presentation?
We can see everything, Mr. Kenny. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Thank you very much for having myself, John Kenny, and my colleague, Kaylee Mortimer from Urban Systems present to you a summary presentation on the building energy efficiency of Revelstoke beer program. We appreciate this opportunity and we look forward to any questions and comments you may have in regards to it. By way of background, this work started in 2022 with the final report being materially complete in 2023 and then officially finalized in early 2024. The overall purpose of the beer program, in short, was to advance the design of a program led by the city of Revelstoke to accelerate home and building energy retrofits within the community. In other words, essentially encourage residents and business owners to decarbonize their homes through energy efficiency measures and support residents and business owners in navigating a maze of energy efficiency grants and retrofit programs. If you've taken a look or have been interested in exploring home energy retrofits in your own residence, you can be sure to see many different programs out there, federal, BC Hydro, provincial, and so on and so forth. And I guess the other goal associated with the beer study program was to advance the city's community energy and emissions plans, goals and objectives in terms of emission reductions and energy savings. The scope of the beer study was quite comprehensive. It included a number of different phases. I'll start with at the highest level, reviewing of all those programs I just mentioned that are available through utility companies, for example, BC Hydro, provincial funding programs, the federal government, and so on and so forth. And the idea here was to identify those programs and how they may be leveraged by your local residents through a city-specific program. I guess the other key component here was to identify potential partnership opportunities between the city and other agencies that could help with the program's goals. So for example, there were some discussions with local credit unions, and again, we had some conversations and explorations with BC Hydro. And then in addition to that, we took all that information and did if you will, a jurisdictional review to understand what other municipalities throughout British Columbia and throughout North America are doing to incentivize and accelerate energy efficiency improvements within buildings. So we through that review, we came up with a number of design ideas to again accelerate these types of activities within homes in your community. In addition to that, we spent some time assessing the impact of these programs on energy savings and greenhouse gas emission reductions. So in other words, if you were to retrofit your home with a new furnace, how much would that save in terms of energy costs as well as greenhouse gas emissions? Conversely, if you were to do a new furnace and an air source heat pump, what would again be the energy savings and greenhouse gas emission reductions? With all that, we through collaborations with staff and some survey efforts with the community at large, we came up with the idea of a voluntary program that provides retrofit grant and rebate, if you will, system information system that basically provides a one-stop shop for the residents of Revelstoke. Again, as mentioned, there's a plethora of different programs out there. The idea here was to again provide a one-window approach that made it easy for people to go through the process of securing funding, incentives, low-cost loans, zero-interest loans to implement different energy conservation measures. In addition to that, the idea of the city of Revelstoke providing a top-up incentive, if you will, or a little cherry on top of $350 per home. This was intended to be, or the incentive was proposed to be a rebate. And the core condition of it is that you'd actually have to go through all phases of the beer program, which I will present on the next slide. So like other home energy retrofit incentive programs, the most prominent being right now in Canada, the Greener Homes Initiative. There's a number of phases, or 3 core phases that homeowners have to go through to secure, if you will, the additional $350. So we've aimed to align this so it's not a new process, but one that's, again, leveraging existing and familiar models. So first and foremost, in phase 1, we have pre-retrofit activities, which include applying to beer, so a simple sign-up exercise. As with any other home energy retrofit program, such as the one I mentioned earlier, the Greener Homes Initiative, you have to have what's called an EnerGuide assessment completed to basically get a baseline understanding of your home's energy performance. And then from there, you move into phase 2, you complete a series of different retrofits in your home. And this is, again, where that one-stop shop would come into play. And through this, the program would help folks identify the various programs that are out there to help lower the cost of completing, again, air source heat pump installations, new furnaces installation, new windows, and so on and so forth. Upon completion of your retrofits, you would do a post-evaluation through the EnerGuide auditor, just as you would for some of the other programs that exist, and submit that to the beer program, and from there receive an additional $350 from the city for the work that has been completed on your house. In terms of financial implications, we're kind of keeping it simple for this in this slide here. Basically, we did a bit of a sensitivity analysis to understand what this may potentially cost the city should it be advanced. So we looked at like a range of 20 homes up to 60 homes, with it simply being 20 times 350 equals $7,000 on the low end, and then on the higher end, if we had an uptake of 60 homes participating per year, we get to $21,000 in costs. I think what I will also mention here is that I'm sorry if I get the name of the program slightly off here, but the idea of where this funding could potentially come from, or the source of funding from within the city of Revelstoke, is the Greening City Reserve Fund, which through discussions with staff, we understand there's approximately $30,000 in there of revenue per year. And then with that, there's and this is with support from Kenny and other staff, the financial implications, program administrative and startup costs. So one of the things to note is the program's not fully designed out. This was sort of a, if you will, a feasibility study. So there is additional work that would need to be completed. So there's an allowance there for startup costs and further program design of $45,000. There's an acknowledgement that these programs take time and effort to administer. On the low end, $47,000, with a higher program uptake, $142,000. Again, there we have the annual subsidy cost on the low end, $7,000, on the higher end, $21,000. So yeah, that basically sums up to, on the low program uptake, about $100,000 a year. On the higher program uptake scenario that we completed, you see a startup cost of approximately $208,000. And with that, maybe I'll stop there because I want to be mindful of your time, and you've got a jam-packed schedule. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present that information, that summary report. And if there's any questions, we'd be happy to field them.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Kenny. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I'll put the recommendation, the Urban Assistance Report dated May 2023 entitled Beer Program Feasibility Study Final Report and any other required documents be submitted to the Green Municipal Fund to finalize the grant project, and that no further action by staff be undertaken at this time.
Second for the motion, Councillor Cherry.
I'll speak to the motion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so lots of word study. So if I'm to interpret what happened here, there was some grant out there that sounded really good, nice green stuff or whatever. And we've spent a whole bunch of staff time. We've hired a consultant. He's done a great job. At the end of the day, there's just using the consultant's words, a plethora of things out there other people are looking after, and staff is basically saying, we got other stuff to do. So if that's more or less correct, I thank you very much. And it's something to remind council when applying for, and staff when applying for grants. As good as it's nice to have free money, sometimes it's not so free.
Yeah, unintended consequences. Mr. Gibb.
Yeah, to speak further to that, essentially this was a grant program that was started prior to my time here with the city of Revelstoke, and it was something that I did take on partial oversight for during my time here. And once it started diving into it, the grant program, it was that truly to develop this feasibility, to do the feasibility study, to see if it is feasible for us to implement something like this or to create a program like this, and then what potential implications it would have on budgeting costs, staff time, everything like that. So throughout that, we've kind of achieved what we were setting out to in the kind of the beginning at a higher level. It's being determined that it is not currently feasible within current capacities. And to Councillor Palmer's point there, absolutely, it is something we do. We don't want to be just chasing down these grants just because they do look good. We do have to be cognizant of our staff resources, which is why we've put forward this recommendation.
Appreciate that comment. Any other comments from Councillor Lana?
Your worship, in the reports, there's some other options presented, just by way of, personal feedback on this. And it more is not really directed in-house to municipal staff, but to the designers of these various programs here. One would hope that they are effective. If you're giving away money, it shouldn't be a hard thing to do, especially if you're setting the rules in place that are going to make sure it's effective and targeted. Yet, this has been a target of, or a subject of conversation for decades now, and oftentimes I feel that they miss the mark simply because they're far too complicated. They're under promoted. They're not marketed. People are not aware of them. They set down the path and then they give up. And from a community perspective, just of Revelstoke, if people can pay less for fuel, save money on upgrading their house, live in a healthier home, it would stand to reason that it would be ideal for us to optimize those federal and provincial funding if that's just something, if all it takes is somebody going and applying and being able to do an appropriate retrofit. So my question is this, looking at the various options in front of us, how do we get there? My feeling is it's not this complicated. For example, from a literacy perspective, a lot of people are just going to give up right away when they see this, 60 pages of flow charts and charts and whatnot. No way. And I imagine the actual applications are easier, but I find that they're often just baffling and often full of lack of clarity, gambles you have to take, spend a whole bunch of money to get there. But just from that perspective, looking at this and looking at the decision in front of us today, I would like to, if I can, through the chair, just sort of request staff advice to say, how do we get there in a more simple way and maximize this? How do we, without administering the program, How do we maximize the dollars we're getting from federal and provincial partners for these upgrades? And believe you me, I'm sure we can all see you driving around town. We have a lot of old stock houses here that could benefit from those. So that's my thought.
Do you want to weigh in, Mr. Kim?
Yeah, absolutely, Your Worship, through the chair to Councilor Orlando. Absolutely, right? There are a plethora of programs out there. Ultimately, what it is this is kind of a piggyback program off of federal and provincial subsidy programs. So currently, the report does outline quite a few different provincial and federal subsidies, as well as Crown Corporation subsidies to encourage people to try to do these upgrades and these energy efficiency upgrades. And it is very important for these older homes to do those upgrades. People will notice it on their heating bills, their electrical bills, everything. This program was more along the lines of seeing if it was possible to develop a one-stop shop. So essentially a place where you can sign in and search to see what different grants, different subsidies there were for you that would apply to your situation. So this report, obviously it is now public. It is public documentation, being that it is on the council agenda, as well as it does get sent to FCM for their publication as well to share with the public. And so it does identify where all these grant programs lay. The additional costs to implement something like this for us, we would be looking at offering that additional subsidy. But the actual implementation, what that program would look like, the more granular details of how we'd administer the program, how people would apply for the program, all of that would have to be developed as a part of next phases if we were to proceed forward. So based on limited staff capacity, that's why we put forward the recommendation to submit the final reporting to FCM and then do not proceed from there. But if council so wished, we would have to look at putting forward a potential spending package request for 2025 to proceed forward with next steps.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just have a follow-up. I kind of feel like it's misplaced making this a municipal program. This seems like a provincial level program where somebody is saying, getting their AI chatbot out to ask you how old's your house, kind of windows you got, those kinds of things, and following up with a summer student who can hold your hand through the more challenging things that you can't answer there. Does staff have any recommendations for not moving forward with this particular federal sort of funding stream, but being effective perhaps on a communication sense focused at just targeting our community and making sure that or providing resources or information at least to people who just kind of have written this kind of stuff off because they're just going to get hit by a wall of insane paperwork to not go ahead with these things. So that's my thought.
Councilor Palmer.
Yeah, so just further to that, on the program. So I remember in the 1970s in the construction, so there was a federal grant program for insulation. I was blowing in cellular insulation without a mask. It's now a carcinogen, but and there's been these programs over years for upgrading, and those programs, which are often at a federal or provincial level or both, and like they're saying, there's a whole bunch of programs out right now, and I think staff aren't aware of it. So somebody comes in, the simple answer is the private sector. There's people out there, they make money by helping you save money. So go talk to your contractor. So whether you're going with heat pumps or insulation or window replacement or buying a new Tesla or all those things, those programs are out there. And if we get involved with that at the local level, I think what this report is saying is just going to cost the taxpayers even more money at the local level. So go to your contractor, they'll help you. Mm-hmm. They're running off their feet right now, putting in heat pumps. Programs there.
Mr. Gipp.
Yeah, so absolutely, Councilor Palmer there. One thing for everybody kind of to understand the background of the piece of this is there is current provincial legislation within the building code that dictates what energy modeling or when you have to do energy modeling, what energy performance levels you need to meet on new construction, renovation, substantial renovations and additions, which do lay out the performance paths that you need to meet for those buildings. So help improve the overall efficiency of it. If people are interested on pursuing these grant programs, The first step is to reach out to an energy advisor. An energy advisor, that is a big part of what they do. It's not just the contractors, but the contractors and the energy advisors will both truly support you through that process. That is a part of their role, is to help find which grant programs would apply to your situation. So both the contractors, as Councilor Palmer identified, and the energy advisors can really help get you through this. And if this is the, if council would like, one thing they could put forward is, reaching out to other municipalities to rally at UBCM and SILGA about getting the federal and the provincial government to simplify these programs and how people can get these programs and get some of these subsidies and grants, because it is quite a complicated process.
Okay, any other comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. I'm gonna ask for a 10-minute break at this time. We can use the washroom. And we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Ms. Delasella, if you could put up a notice that we're taking a break to Mr. Kenny and Ms. Mortimer. Thank you for your time and for the work that you've put in on this report. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Ms. Delaselle, we're ready to get back at it.
Certainly, Your Worship. The screen, or go ahead, Your Worship.
We're good. All right. Thank you, Ms. Delaselle. All right, council, let's get back at 11B. We have a good news story this afternoon. Ecological Gift Program land donation, and I want to thank Miss Virginia Thompson and her gift of a park to the city, and we're glad to see this coming to fruition. So thank you for your work and time and energy and the donation of your land. We appreciate that very much. Ms. Floyd, comments?
So just to echo that, Virginia, thank you very much for working with all of us at the city. This kind of has been ongoing since June 2022, where in an in-camera meeting, we signed a letter of intent with Ms. Thompson, and she has worked with the city and as well with the Ecological Gift Program of Environment and Climate Change Canada to come to this final report here with some recommendations that are before you for consideration.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion on the table. Councilor Palmer, would you like to put it on?
Sure, be pleased to. That additional urban forest and natural park protections be added to the subject lands located at 711 and 789 Cedar Street, legally described as lots 1 and 2, block 15, section 35, township 23, range 2, west of the 6th Meridian, Kootenai District Plan 636K PID 010-147-478 and PID 010-147-551 immediately upon the land transfer from Ms. Virginia Thompson to the city of Revelstoke.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councilor Lucelle. Any conversation or discussion on the motion? Councilor Palmer.
Yeah, I've been involved a little bit over the years, so just a little bit of background. Again, thank you so much to Ms. Thompson, and a legacy to our community, a legacy as to the values of our community of Natural Park. I would also like to really compliment staff, administration, and the planning department working on how we can have parks, and the recreation department. Actually, they've all been involved on the natural park and a greater understanding within the province and across North America, quite frankly, on the values of parks that are left in a natural state. And so these kind of protections on this one here, but there's other resolutions that we can start to see how that can be introduced. And we already have examples of that already in Revelstoke. So that's my comments.
Great. Any other comments from council? I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Number 2, Councilor Palmer.
That in accepting the donation of land that the city of Revelstoke commits to carrying out all recipient responsibilities of the Ecological Gift Program of Environment and Climate Change Canada, which in essence is keeping the land as a natural park or urban forest in perpetuity.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Staples. Any discussion on this motion?
I'll just speak very briefly, just in case there's any question about where this land is. It's up on Cedar. There's some very beautiful mature trees and a natural stream that goes through there. It's highly valued in that community. The responsibilities under this program is to ensure that natural status and the protection of the trees on that land are protected forever. And unlike some other parkland, the way our zoning is right now, you can have a parking lot that's just all paved and be a park. Well, that can't. This basically saying that can never happen.
Right. And any other comments from council? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Number 3, naming of the park. Councilor Palmer.
That the name Serenity Park be approved and that robust enduring signage identifying the land as Serenity Park, including a description of the protections placed on the land in perpetuity, be erected.
Seconder for the motion, Councilor Cherry.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a question or a potential friendly amendment. Can we also add and that this be reported out on our social media page?
So
because it's
just
public.
as the mover it's seconded now, I'm quite happy to do that as a separate resolution at the end.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so it's a good question on communications to the community. I will speak briefly to the motion as well. There's part of me that, I haven't ever said this to Virginia, but there's part of me that thinks it should be called Thompson Park, Virginia Thompson Park, just because of the work that you've done. But it's a request from Ms. Thompson for Serenity Park and just the values that she has in recognizing this. And I'm sure that we will be recognizing Ms. Thompson also with our signage. And so thank you very much.
Great. All right. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. And number 4.
That an amendment to the Parks Master Plan be supported to designate Serenity Park as a natural park and urban forest.
Seconder for that motion, please. Councilor Lucio.
I'll speak to that briefly. So we already have some natural parks. Basically, they're largely untouched. There's some minor maintenance and liability things that we have to do. The Parks Master Plan, this protection, the intent here is to make sure that it's well understood and well documented in not only through the ecological GIP program, but that it's identified in our Parks Master Plan. That's appropriate as all other parks are in that plan as well. So it's a very minor amendment that would put that in immediately. Thank you.
All right. I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Thank
And
you.
then I'll put a final motion just further to Councillor Cherry's that staff work with Ms. Thompson on an appropriate communications plan to the community, including social media.
Councilor Cherry is seconding that. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Now, because of the wonderful gift that you've given us, Ms. Thompson, would you like to come and speak at all? Just a few words. How do you feel? Sure.
Planned on this. I thought, they could speak, and
Well, I'm giving you permission.
so I'm not prepared. But I am in a way because as Cindy and Tim and various people know, this has been going on for a long time, and I'm just thrilled, absolutely emotional that it's finally happening, and I hope that it's kind of a beacon for more such things. This is what we need in our community. We need to love our land. And because it gives us peace. I was a mental health counselor and I also did a degree in eco psychology, and I know how important it is for people's health and well-being, both physically and mentally. And so I had this bit of land, which we didn't pay very much for, but I mean, goodness, it's apparently grown in value a lot. But I always wanted it never to be developed because it's so beautiful. If you walk there, you're just enveloped in this peace, and you hear the water and the trees, and everything is just, dark and quiet. And you can go there before work, you can go there at lunch, you can go there after work without getting in your car, probably. It's not the same. I know we live in wilderness and we're so gifted, but this is different than getting in your car or going camping or, making a trip or having a holiday. This is something you do every day. You can unwind, start your day communing with nature, unwind in your lunch hour, and go there after work to get rid of the stress. And this is so important. Anyway, Thank you all.
Thank
And
you.
especially big thank you to Cindy Lloyd and Tim Palmer, and the mayor, who was very supportive in the letter of intent. All of you, I really thank you especially.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to item C, the lease for the curling club. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please? Councilor Lucy.
I move that the lease agreement with the Revelstoke Curling Club Society for a portion of the building known as the curling facility located at 1100 Vernon Ave be approved for a 5-year term.
Second for the motion, please. Councilor Staples. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Item number 2. Councilor Luciano, you put that on as well?
Sure. I move that council give notice of their intention to dispose of an interest in land by the way of a lease of a portion of a building and property located at 1100 Vernon Ave, City of Revelstoke, BC, legally described as lots 2 and 3, section 27, township 23, range 2, W6M, Kootenai District, Plan 4118, for the purpose of a curling facility for a 5-year term commencing May 1st, 2024 to April 30th, 2029, to the Revelstoke Curling Club Society, and to provide assistance at the annual rate of 1% of all income based on the prior year's gross revenue for less than fair market value rent.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Palmer. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right. We have the Emergency Preparedness Fund. Chief DeRossi, do you have any presentation or words before we put this motion on the table?
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I will just speak to this briefly to let you know the Emergency Preparedness Fund for Emergency Operations Centers Equipment and Training. We have applied for this grant in the amount of $17,000 with a contribution in kind from the city. And so this is to primarily hire a consultant and do some mock exercises for the Emergency Operations Center team to bring us up to speed, get us more experience. So we're looking at, and not related, we've been looking at this for a little while, interagency training with CP and other entities, for example, Trainwreck and Revelstoke, as well as looking at doing some tabletop exercises with the senior staff for the upcoming wildfire season. So we have applied for this, and we are seeking council's support in retrospect to support this application. If council chooses not to support it, we would withdraw the application from the UBCM. So that's all I have for you today. Willing to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Questions for Chief DeRossi?
Just quickly, is this on the table yet?
No.
Okay. You mind if I put it on the
Chair, you
table?
want to put it on?
Thanks, Your Worship. I move that submission of an application to UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Emergency Operations Centers Equipment and Training Stream be approved.
Seconder for the motion. Councilor Devlin. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'll just say that anything we can do to support firefighters in town, I'm here to throw my support on.
Great, appreciate it. Councilor Orlando, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, just a general question through the chair. In terms of, I know this is the budget is fairly small compared to all the other things that are working in place, but ahead of the fire season this year, my question, which there's concern about due to low snowpack and last year as well, my question is pretty focused on actionable public communications in the event of a some sort of emergency, such as one requiring a full or partial evacuation, that kind of stuff. My question is, in my experience last summer when I was evacuated in the Okanagan, was that people were on the same page and knew exactly where to get real-time information in that sort of event. They knew where it was going to be and could go there. What I would like to take this opportunity, since we're talking about community emergency preparedness, especially for incidents like train derailments, as the chief had mentioned, is that can we focus on just that core component of communication right now ahead of that season by putting out just simple, repeated, not once, but repeated communication, just directing people where they should go to find information. I feel that maybe, you know, if we asked everyone around, how many people around the table are super confident they know exactly where that is? It's my question. There we go. I see some head shaking here. Yeah, that's my concern. So I don't know if the mover would be interested in some sort of amendment to add a communication, a brief and clear and succinct and repeated communication effort regarding just that core emergency component, communication component.
Why don't we add that as a separate entity after this one?
Sure.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion on the table, Councillor Staples?
Yeah, just to Councillor Orlando's point of the communication, I think potentially, if I'm understanding this correctly, and the chief can correct me if I'm mistaken, but the opportunity for them to attend training, they might be able to highlight some of the deficiencies that they have within the operation and how they respond, in which case they'd be able to identify those deficiencies and how to correct them, such as communication. I know Councillor Orlando brought up the Okanagan and Kelowna and the evacuations that happened there, but my understanding from that event was the website actually crashing because everybody was accessing it. So, you know, tabletop exercise, you do the exercise, you identify your deficiencies, and you develop a corrective action plan to remedy those. So that's my point. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, just sort of debating a long meeting and stuff, how much to weigh in. A couple of questions. When's the last time we had a good, robust interagency tabletop exercise?
Comment on that, Chief?
Through your worship, to Councillor Palmer, I believe it was a number of years back. I believe it was before the dreaded pandemic, and we've had a few minor, smaller ones. Still interagency, but for example, with Fortis, to do some exercise like boots on the ground, not tabletops, but actual exercises, mock exercises on the ground. So we've done a couple of that sort of thing. But no larger scale ones that involved the senior leadership team and the city staff.
So
since I've been here,
right? And you've been here. Well, I won't ask that question. So on the because I'm really focused in thank you very much just for clarity to the police or the Fire Chief. I'm very appreciative of the work that you're doing and the activity. So I am very critical and have been publicly critical of our lack of preparation for an emergency. As an individual councillor, I do not feel that we as council are ready. So this is sort of good news that we're getting a little bit of funding and we'll do a tabletop. The other question, which I won't ask, I'll say what the question was. When's the last time we actually did a full scale mock? So, and then the other question is, if a train crash happens today and there's a major fires in oil or other hazardous substance right here, are we ready? And so, and then just to comment on that, so these programs come in and it's appropriate to apply for that. And it's appropriate for staff to look at the, you know, where are we going to get the best value for our dollar. At the same time, if we're getting a consultant to do those sort of core things that I think the tabletop should be happening annually and interagency annually. And so those are some of the concerns I have. I'm supportive of this motion so that we get something done. But I think council needs to wrestle with the long term. How are we ensuring that we're doing our responsibility at this table to make sure that we're ready for wildfire, flood, rail accident, some other thing that we don't even know what it is. So I'm appreciative of that, and I am appreciative of staff and look forward to having this move ahead and getting a report back to council. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried unanimously. Councillor Orlando, would you like to put something on regarding communication?
Sure. That staff prepare interim communication, appropriate interim communication focused on where residents can find real-time source information in the event of emergency, a major emergency that involves something like evacuation or other precautions such as close your doors because of smoke, that kind of thing.
Okay, seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Palmer. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Palmer.
Probably my only concern about the motion is what the answer is, we don't know. Anyway, bit tongue in cheek, but I'm also concerned about that.
And so I'm going to be supportive of this motion. I think it's imperative that we prepare in whatever capacity we can. That kind of leaves things wide open for you, Keith, as to decide how that communication can be done so that we can set things up for success for any emergency, especially this year. And I'll leave that. Councillor Palmer, further?
Yeah, just a comment on that. Definitely it's for the fire chief and with his staff to be looking at that. That's where emergency preparation is in that department right now. There's a question as to whether that's the best location because they have in an emergency, they have their work to do. Rather than looking at the broader picture necessarily. But also in the communications, we do have a new communications coordinator. The fire department does a pretty outstanding job on social media and communicating with the public on things they're doing. But I do note that it's also kind of a silo here. So I think that's a discussion for staff to have as to merging what's the best way of doing it. So we have this, the whole management team, administration, part of that, and our communications coordinator as well, providing expertise.
Chief.
Your worship, to all of council, absolutely, comments clearly heard, and that's one of the things that we're looking at with the new communications position is to get Ms. Williams up to speed with the public information officer component and some training for that as a position within the EOC, so that when things are happening, we will have that professional level embedded within the operations to push out that information consistently and, as you say, real time. I think one of the things that what I would like to see is, and I believe this is happening also with the communications, is an improvement to the website and how the emergency fire and emergency pages are displayed and organized. So I know everybody's really busy, and that's one of the things that I would like to get either simplified or find a better method of communicating with the public. We do have the ability to push out on the city's website, of course, the fire Facebook. We also have the other social media platforms. So websites are static. You put up information, people can go find it. Facebook is a little bit more interactive, whereas the Twitter X is a push notifications. So just exactly how we're going to get that information out. We also have the alertable system through the CSRD. We are partners with that. And the alertable system, that's where I get all the information about the highway closures and that sort of thing. It pushes out to individuals' phone. It's absolutely cost-free to any of the users. We need to practice more, and so that's part of the program, is to get that, build those skills so that when these things do happen, even if they're minor, we'll be prepared for those, and staff will have some expertise in that.
Great, appreciate that. Thanks, Steve. Let's vote on this. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thanks again, Chief. Appreciate all that you're doing over there.
You're most welcome.
We're gonna move on to removal of contravention notice on title. Someone want to put that motion on? Councilor Palmer.
As written.
Okay, seconder for the motion, please. You can see that we're getting tired. Councilor Lucien. So, Mr. Simon, do you want to weigh in on this, or Mr. Gibb?
Through your worship, there's nothing unique about this, pretty standard, buildings completed inspection, Mr. Gibbs can talk about it, if you guys have questions specifically on it, but there's no concerns from staff or discharge.
I have no questions, I'm content. Councilor Cherry, he wants to stay here for a little longer.
Apologies, Your Worship. Through the chair, Mr. Gibbs, can you give us a brief synopsis on what it takes to remove?
Absolutely, through your worship to council chair and the rest of the council. Essentially, if somebody has a notice registered on their title, this is an older style of notice. Currently, under new standards, it would be considered a section 57 notice on title. However, this one was done many years ago. So essentially, if someone who would like to have this covenant or this notice on title removed, first start is come have a conversation with us. We ultimately will have to pull a copy of that charge to see what exactly the deficiencies are. In most cases, it does require an application of a building permit, depending on the extent of the matter of non-compliance. And then would they be applying for the removal of the notice on title as well. So typically, once that's all, once the building permit's been approved and issued, and once the work is being completed, an inspector would go out there, verify that the issues have been resolved, prepare a report accordingly as seen and attached to this report, and then submitted to, in this case, the planning tech for preparation of this report to come to council for approval of the removal.
Answer your question, Council.
You awake? Yes. Sorry, guys. Slight emergency popped up.
All right, any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. Moving on to item F. Mr. Simon, do you have a brief presentation on this motion prior to us?
Through your worship, yes, Ms. Hartling unfortunately is ill today, so the next two items I'll present for her. If council wants to see a presentation, I can definitely give a brief overview, but if not, I'm happy to speak to it should council have questions as well. So,
How do you feel? I think we've had this discussion on this piece of property before, but I'll ask. You want to, yeah, Councilor?
Just one question. I'm prepared to put the motion on the table. Has it gone through APC?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll put the motion on the table as written.
Okay, second for the motion, please. I'll make that motion then.
Just have a question regarding the motion in APC. Can you highlight their feedback?
through your worship, Councilor Palmer, yeah, so when this went to APC, it went to APC, just double checking the date, April 25th, 2023. So they had substantial commentary on this particular application. In essence, you can see in the report on page 8, there's a couple of pictures that show the rendering pre-going to APC, and then the rendering as part of the package are the feedback being addressed as well as the feedback from staff on the initial review. In essence, the APC said this isn't a scenic corridor. Let's make it look like something that's inviting for people that are visiting and living within town that are cruising along one of our most major arterial roadways into the city that leads ultimately to the resort and downtown, so a lot of amenities within the community. And the applicant had made several changes as a result of the staff review as well as the APC comments. You'll notice a heavy presence of cedar wood within the design as well as stone around the base of the gas pumps and the sign that was proposed. So a lot of back and forth, and I want to really commend Ms. Hartling for working diligently with the applicant. It's been a long process to get it to council, and I think that this will probably be one of the best looking Centexes that there is within the interior. So a lot of pushback.
And then a second question, I think it's a really easy yes or no, hopefully yes. This complies with ours, this permit would comply with our zoning and OCP.
Through your worship, yes, but one caveat I would like to know, staff are really close to releasing the draft zones and the draft zoning map for our zoning bylaw. And you will notice within the updated zoning bylaw, the used gasoline service station is removed from the scenic corridor properties and is only permitted within the highway commercial area. So all the gas stations would essentially become lawful non-conforming uses. So they are permitted because they're okay under the zoning right now, but staff will be recommending that that be changed, but that is a subsequent conversation for council in the future. But I just don't want you to be surprised when you see that change recommended in a couple weeks.
Yeah, so, yeah, just a couple comments then. Yeah, interesting that this will have impact as we come into the community as of, any of our scenic corridor things. This is, one of the bigger ones as you come into town. And so the question of, would I prefer something rather than a gas station? Probably. However, that's been an eyesore there for a very, 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 very long time. I'm pleased to hear that, that staff and with feedback from APC is, brought up to, it is a gas station, but, and other stuff, but it is reasonable. So that's my comment. So I'll make the motion and then I'll also be supportive of that. Thank you, Mayor Souls.
Councilor Chair.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through the chair, to Mr. Simon, what sort of teeth do we have as a city and as city council to ensure that they actually build what they're proposing right now? And we don't end up in the same predicament we did with an applicant a couple doors away.
Through your worship to Councillor Cherry, we won't issue a building permit unless that building permit complies with the development permit. We do complete inspections and we are reviewing our internal processes to make sure that planning staff are getting out on some of these commercial, industrial, multi-unit residential applications to ensure adherence to the development permit. Mr. Gibbs will be having bylaw amendments coming forward this year to our municipal ticketing information bylaw as well as our adjudication bylaw, I believe, so that any non-compliance with a development permit is a ticketable offense. So we are trying diligently to make sure that we have some more teeth to enforce the development permit conditions as they currently exist in UC.
Just to follow up, Your Worship, to the chair, will that be a daily ticketing?
Yeah, through your worship to Councilor Cherry. Yes, it could be a daily ticketing offense. It is currently added into our adjudication bylaw. And we will be looking at doing it as a part of the amendment to the MDI bylaw as well.
And through your worship, one extra item, because we are getting better at coordinating our processes between the building inspectors and the planners, we would be heavily pushing the building inspectors to not issue occupancy if there is a non-compliance with DP noted prior to or as part of that final inspection.
And as a follow-up, that includes conditional occupancy.
Through your worship, so we're trying to avoid getting into the conditional occupancy realm in some circumstances. It depends on what the nature of the non-compliance is. If the non-compliance is something incredibly minor, then it's at the discretion of the building official and the chief building officer as well. But generally speaking, we try to avoid conditional compliance or occupancy, especially on these types of projects for commercial.
Thanks. And Your Worship, although it's slightly outside the realm of this application, through the chair, Mr. Simon, can you give us an update on other items in the scenic corridor other than the gas station being removed that will enhance?
So just a point of order, I want to stay focused on this.
Okay.
We can bring that up.
Yeah, I want to get this done.
I do have one question, apologize, Mayor Souls, but just a question on the ingress and egress to the property. Are you permitted a left-hand turn onto Victoria?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, you'll notice there's a condition within the development permit that references an appropriate turning analysis being completed. They did a traffic impact assessment as part of the development permit. If they can't demonstrate that the sightlines are appropriate to make a left turn out of there, they will be required as part of the building permit construction process to install signage that restricts left turns specifically for larger vehicles. So that will be something that they'll have to prove out at building permit stage, but they very well may not be permitted for left turns out of there onto Victoria Road because the sightlines are quite challenging.
Right, thank you, because intuitively, I'm thinking that's probably not going to work very well. They probably wouldn't be happy about that because they will have trouble capturing the traffic going out. But the mall has that one sign prohibiting that left-hand turn there, which is less challenged than this site. Not that many people actually pay attention to that sign, but.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's gonna be good, but my biggest fear is going to be tanker truck pulling out, wanting to turn left. And there's gonna have to be some education there with how they go in and how they go out.
Yeah.
So that we don't have any tragedies coming in. Mr. Simon.
Your worship, I do just want to point out section 6.1 of the associated permit that we are recommending for issuance here. They do got to provide a strategy for management and maintenance to keep those sight lines clear, to mitigate the risk of left-hand turns. And if they can't do that to the satisfaction of the city's engineering department, then we would not permit left-hand turns, and those heavy trucks would have to go all the way to the roundabout to be able to get back on the face northwestbound on Victoria Road.
All right, any other comments before I call a question? Councilor Lucy.
Thank you, Marshals. To Mr. Simon, I was just wondering if there is anything in the OCP in regards to gas stations in the scenic corridor.
Through your worship, Councilor Lucio, very good question. Yes, we try to restrict them out to the highway commercial area, but the mechanism, the regulatory tool that we do that by is the zoning bylaw. Hence my earlier reference to that zoning bylaw update. So this application is just in a little bit ahead of us with getting that zoning bylaw rewritten. Very, very critical project from a land use perspective to enforcing some of those policies within the OCP.
Okay, thank you.
And this being a former gas station and seeing that the diligence in with what they're coming up with, and this will be the last gas station along that corridor. I'm supportive of it, but we all have some reservations. So. All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councilor Lucio, you're opposed? Okay. No, Councilor Lucio is opposed. Balance of council is in favor. This motion has been carried. Item number 2, does someone want to put that on? Councilor Palmer.
As written.
Okay, seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Lucio. Any further discussion on that motion regarding the auto renewing letter of credit? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving on to item G. Now I understand Councillor Devlin, you need to make a statement, is that correct?
Yes, I do. I'm a current employee of the hotel, so I'm going to have to recuse myself for this one. If somebody would just like to message me when it's safe to pop back in, please.
Thank you. All right, so is there a bit of a presentation with this, Mr. Simon, or, my feeling is it's pretty straightforward, but how do you feel as council? Are you okay just asking questions, having read your report? Councilor
I'll put the motion on the table as written, ask questions after.
Okay, seconder for the motion, please, Councillor Stapenhurst. Questions for Mr. Simon regarding the Griswold?
Yeah, so I actually timed you a little bit earlier when a councillor asked you to keep it under a minute. Can you do that again?
Through your worship, yes, under 30 seconds this time. You guys over here. So council has seen this permit before, so this is an amendment to an existing permit that has been issued. What you're looking at in a nutshell is some facade improvements and upgrades to the existing building. As the applicant has gone through and looked at costing and what's been worked with the project material availability, they've made some tweaks and changes. And as part of this application, there's also some enhanced landscaping to the rear. You might have noticed some of those AC units at the back. Ms. Hartland has worked with the proponent to get better screening up as part of the development permit. So we're at the point now where this application has addressed most of the staff requirements, subject to some of the preconditions to issuance that we put in there regarding landscaping. And we are at the point that we are recommending council approve this permit. And once those conditions are met, we can issue and the applicant can get on the way.
Anybody time that?
40.
Any other questions for Mr. Simon? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Can somebody send a text to Councillor Devlin and get them signed back? Okay, thank you. We'll get him back up and then we can carry. All right, welcome back, Councillor Demlin. All right, we're gonna go on to communication strategic priorities chart. Mr. CAO.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just quickly, always trying to update this and make it as current as possible. I know that there's some time set aside in the spring for council to re-engage on its strategic priorities. But again, this is something that has been a working document since I've arrived, since we've spent time together. So if there's any questions, I can certainly answer them. Just finally to note, I do expect an opportunity to spend a day with you folks between now and June. And we can talk about sort of updating it in a more robust discussion, because I know there's a lot on the table. So we just try to keep this document moving and as organic as it is. It's supposed to be changing and it's supposed to reflect what you folks have been working on. So with that, I can take any questions. Thank you.
Let's say hydrogen plant?
Yeah, we've had some people approach us looking for space and proposal of a hydrogen plant for the area.
Yeah, all preliminary.
Within city limits?
So, Mayor Souls, that's great, and thank you for the chart, having that back on here. I look forward to our session. And as the CEO said, it's organic and sort of ongoing. I would suggest, I'm not sure exactly how, without tinkering with how it's administered, but this is basically council strategic priorities. So these other things like the hydrogen plant, I don't think really belong on here unless there's a specific resolution from council. But maybe we can have that dialogue when we have the strategic priority session on how we go about doing that. But that'd be my comment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions for our CAO, Councilor Luciano?
Thank you, Marshals. Yeah, I think as we look to have this strategic priorities chart grow and evolve with this, I know through the Public Infrastructure Committee, water metering had been something that had come forward. So I'd look to have that added to the strategic priority chart moving forward.
Okay. And Councilor Orlando, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, Your Worship, just to echo Councillor Palmer's sentiment on making sure making sure that if there's changes that council's appraised, because I just wouldn't want somebody to ask why are you doing this or that, and I just don't have an answer to that. That has been the subject of very cursory discussion at the economic development, but no, not really development of that. As people may be aware, the provincial government is trying to incentivize to some extent transportation hydrogen projects, but it's sort of early stage.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, let's move on. Social Development Committee minutes for January. Councilor Luciano.
Thank you, Marshals. Just two things really quickly, emergency preparedness and extreme cold weather response. We had a presentation just looking to adopt our heat plan to also factor in extreme cold. We have had some meetings with different entities in town to essentially get our own plan together if extreme cold ever hit us. The province would step in at -30, and we see that there is kind of a gap in the middle that we would want to be able to fill. So there has been a couple different organizations that have come to the table to help with that. The only other thing from that one meeting would be the resort socioeconomic impact study that the city of Revelstoke will be embarking on with 50% of that paid by RMR.
Perfect. Okay. Any questions for Councilor Luciano? Let's move on to the minutes of the Social Development Committee for February.
So that one, we talked about the resolution going forward. We talked about the food security coordinator funding as that funding had gone to Community Connections. They have removed that role, so there is now a new working group that's going to decide where that funding would go. The two front runners seem to be Community Connections and the Local Food Initiative. We talked about the women's shelter is probably going to close. They just don't have funding. They're looking for other entities to join that lease to be able to stay open. And we talked about the strategic plan for the school district.
And so the women's shelter lease is not for the shelter itself, it's for their.
Sorry, the women's center, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are trying to keep that open, but that is a reality that's getting closer. And then we have also had the executive director of Community Connection put her in notice, so she will be done at the end of this month.
Okay. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, let's move on to Heritage Advisory Commission minutes. Councillor Cherry.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm going to keep this brief as everybody would like. As has been ongoing for about the last year and a half, the draft heritage management plan is still ongoing. Staff provided an update that was discussed at the last meeting. I also had a request at the last meeting that the Revelstoke Museum accessibility lift project be added as a future item. So there's an update to the community.
Okay.
On where it's close.
Good. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, let's move on to Advisory Planning Commission. Councillor Chair.
Thanks, Your Worship. We had a number of items, Your Worship. We have a new commercial building proposed on 766 Law Road. The commission discussed accessibility parking spaces as well as what type of materials could be used on the place, as well as potential safety issues with the exterior staircases. All in all, it's a pretty good looking building and definitely an upgrade to the area. Excited to see how that pans out. One that I think is very important for council is the project at 411 and 501 Simpson. This was to rezone the subject lands from special low density R2A to a new residential zone that would allow for 18 multi-unit dwellings, row houses with secondary suites. I encourage everybody here at the table to take a look at that application, as this is something we're going to be seeing more of in the future. It's infill development at its core. Whether that's the right amount or not, it is a very good use of a current lot that's being underutilized for housing developments in the future. There was some concerns from the commission about the density on the property. I believe there are 7 members on the commission and 2 of them voiced some concerns about that. But excited to see that one come to the table sometime in the future.
Great. All right. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, Ms. Delaselle, do we have any questions from the press?
We do not have any questions from the press this evening, Your Worship.
Thank you. All right, I'd like someone to make a motion to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1 D, E, and K, as well as 90.2 B of the community charter. Someone want to make that motion for me? Councillor Stapenhurst, Councillor Lucial. We will now go in camera. And as we're running late, do you want to go right into in camera? Okay.
Can we make sure that Ms. Delaselle has stopped this room?
Sure. Ms. Delaselle, have you stopped